Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all our live listeners and watchers on LinkedIn, and also those of you who are going to listen to this later. I am so very excited to introduce you to Shreyasi Singh. Shreyasi, for me, embodies somebody who has really taken the leap and potentially also multiple times in her life. Very welcome to you, Shreyasi. How are you today?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Good. It's been a busy week. It's been a busy day, but I'm really excited about this conversation with you, Shivangri. So looking forward.
So am I. So am I. So Shreyasi brings around 18 years of combined experience across multiple, fields. I would say broadcast and print journalism, editorial leadership, entrepreneurship, business reportage, book writing, teaching. It's really a very very diverse set of both skills and experience that Shreyasi brings. And today we are going to focus on, I think, one element of Shreyasi's journey, especially the element where you decided, Tracy, to then move from business journalism and higher education to then becoming a founder. And you said something really interesting, that was not something that you imagined for yourself either. And then you took the leap. And I know that today, Harappa, that you have co founded, is one of the most successful educational technology. I'm using the words because so many people ask me, what is edtech? So, edtech for short, in India, and of course, increasing your global presence. So that's the part of your life story that we'll focus on. And also, Tracy, in our pre-talk, you mentioned about, some of the challenges that you went through. I mean, what I'm trying with the Take the Leap podcast is to go behind the scenes, because of course, if anybody goes and checks you out today, you seem to be, and you are, this very successful, very confident founder. So take us back a little bit in your journey. How did you first of all make that leap from journalism to becoming a founder? And what were some of the things that were both going through your mind, but also in your environment, which made it challenging?
Yeah, I know. I actually feel like I have a squiggly, ziggy, zaggy kind of a messy career, which is really difficult to deconstruct and help others understand. But it's been a really fun career. And I'm having a lot of fun. But get to a specific question about when did the business journalism morph into journalism, into entrepreneurship, and what happened was in 2016. By the end of 2016, I had achieved three important milestones that I had, in a way, loosely set for myself. I don't mean to suggest at all to say that I was one of those super, people with like really fixed goals right from the front, but somewhere in the back of your mind, you do know what you're hoping to build towards in a certain career. And for my journalism career, the three things were being the editor of a magazine. Magazines are a format that I love. Like I miss magazines now, a gorgeous Fortune, or even like magazines on cinema, Vanity Fair, or whatever. So was the editor of a magazine was to write a book which is sort of rigorous in, like a narrative nonfiction, and to read a newspaper column. I think 10 years after my journalism career, 10, 12 years into my journalism career, I felt like, wow, somehow those three things seem to have happened. I was the editor of Ink in India for 4 years, and I loved sort of writing that editor's letter. And, bringing a magazine together was just an amazing experience. I had then written my first book called The Wealth Wallas, which is sort of narrative nonfiction on first generation wealth creators and the wealth management industry in India. And I writing a column on called Surviving Startups for Mint, which is one of India's largest business newspapers. So I felt like those three things had been met, and I knew that I had another 30, 40 years to work, right? And I think media itself as an industry was almost in a degrowth. And I had by that time discovered that I had many more skills than just being a journalist. I think we forced, start identifying ourselves as just this or just that. And I think I had discovered that I was more than just a journalist or an editor, and I had more skills than just editorial and writing skills. And that's when really the idea of being an entrepreneur wasn't the first idea. The first idea was I'm more than this, and I want to do more than this, right? And then I moved towards higher education and was sort of part of a core team of a very unique women's only MBA program. And I think that to me was a very sort of really important moment of discovery, to say that hey, education is such a large opportunity, especially when you live in a country like India with 1.4 billion people with such a broken education system. You start to see there are opportunities. And all my journalism in the 8 years before, 6 7 years before that was all about covering entrepreneurs in India. So I was constantly meeting a lot of entrepreneurs, and when you meet entrepreneurs, have this special passion and conviction that's very attractive about them, right? And I used to say, hey, wow, you're smart, but I could do this too. So I think the idea that I could be an entrepreneur came from kind of the admiration of sort of and admiration as well as being able to deconstruct entrepreneurs from before. And then I said, okay, I need to stop writing other people's stories as a journalist, and I need to write my own story and have others write about me. I think that became very, very clear to me, and that was the seed of the idea that I wanted to do something of my own. I think, and the one instrument, and this was I think 2007, summer to autumn, I actually wrote a personal vision statement for myself. And I keep saying at some level, it's a highly narcissistic activity because companies have vision statements and institutions have statements. But when you start to write your own personal vision statement, but that 7 word sentence has been sort of one of the most powerful tools, useful tools for me, for my journey from the moment I wrote it. And it took 5 or 10, 12 drafts to write those 7 words because you really had to. And I wrote, what do I want to do? Like, what is my personal vision for myself in my area of work and for my profession? And I wrote to be recognized for building something of scale and impact. And then I underlined the words recognition, scale, and impact. And I think that actually writing that and underlining those keywords took a lot of honesty to say, hey, I'm not such a selfless person that I'd be a hidden warrior in some part of the world doing amazing work but not wanting to be recognized for it. I think you have to be honest with yourself about really what you are seeking. And I think there was if I'm doing good work, which I want to do, and then scale and impact. And then I put that on a piece of paper and I stuck it in the inside face of my wardrobe at home, because you open it every morning and you will see that. And I think the minute I did that, it became just so clear to me that if want to be recognized, building something of scale and impact wasn't going to come from being in a job, right? It was going to come from sort of taking much more charge of your growth and your trajectory. Being a founder and entrepreneur was sort of, I thought, the most natural way to try and live up to that vision. So that's how it really began.
That is really beautiful. I mean, what you have shared are three things I think which are quite critical, right? Because one is this whole idea of multiple identities. I really, really, that really resonated with me. I mean, as you know, I moved from corporate to also start my own first commercial venture and then a nonprofit. And I think that some of these ideas that we have, they only become real once we actually try them out in the real world. And to do that, to have this personal vision statement, I think is a very, very powerful act. And you already recognize what are the three things. Maybe you didn't have a statement for what you wanted to be as a journalist, but you had some of these goals, like you said, that you achieved. And then you made it much more larger, almost like a company statement, right? Because it's not specifying. I'm reminded always of Steve Jobs and what he speaks about for Apple, right? Because it was that's why I think Apple never remained in a particular area of technology. It went into phones and music and whatever else that it will keep going into, right? So this whole idea of having a personal vision statement, I think that I don't know, you said it's narcissistic. I almost think it is a gift that you can give not just yourself, but to the world, because you are being the best version of yourself. And usually when you are the best version of yourself, the world benefits, right? So it is, I think it's a very powerful way to bring more this, yes, what do I want, but the whole idea of impact and bringing something to the world, that I think makes it a dual sided rather than just looking into yourself. I think, and that is the challenge, right? Tell me a little bit, Shreyasi, about when you did that, right? And you shared with me that you were also, due to personal reasons, moving around, and also taking maybe a break even from a job, right? How did that process work for you? What were, I mean, some of the common themes that women especially speak about are imposter syndrome and self-doubt, and basically, even when you have a vision and a statement like that, which is very powerful, how do you actually navigate the road towards achieving that vision?
I love the way such a way distilled it, and I really do think that the personal vision statement is a gift each one of us can give to ourselves and to those around us. And the way that you articulated the gift to the world, I'd never really thought about it. But you're so right. If each one of us is living up to our truest values and potential, of course, it's good for the collective as well as it always is, right? This unlikely journey that I've had, and now people find it really because people see the way that I work, and I have a lot of conviction in the company that I'm building. I have a complete realization that things like this take a lot of hard work, grit, and resilience. And you need a lot of discipline and determination and drive to do all of this. So when people sort of now see me like this, the fact is, I have a 16-year-old son, and the fact is that when I didn't work, and this is 16 years back, I didn't work from the time he was 0 to 4 years. Now, anyone who knows me now would find it so difficult to believe, but a lot of the conversations on diversity, just much more. There was no remote work. There was none of that, right? And my husband in his company at that time. So, there really wasn't a way. And in a career like journalism, there was no work from home. You're a reporter. What can you be doing sitting at home? This is sort of 16 years back, as I was saying. And actually, I think all of these journeys, what that 4 years taught me, and I think that's what is my kind of advice to people, that even when you feel like not much is happening in your professional career, actually the most important decisions and mindset shifts can happen. Those 4 years, and I was a kind of a young mother, I had him in my mid 20s, which is kind of unreal for my generation right now to have a child early in that sense. Those 4 years were so tough for me from a self-esteem perspective, and I'm so glad that I did it, right? Because I think for all of us, obviously, those of us who've chosen to be mothers, I think our children are the most important part of our lives, and there's so much pride and confidence that you come from raising children well, right? It's a big task and a big company of its own to raise. But the fact is, I think those 4 years of not having work, like formal work, not being able to use my mind in all its potential. To your multiple identities point, it was being nurtured by one identity of a caregiver and a mother, but other identities were not being nurtured and were put on pause. I think those 4 years made me realize what work means to me, right? And how integral it is to my sense of identity and who I am. And I think, after so the last 12 years, I feel like I've been on this almost like relentless drive to make up, and I've never complained about work or how hard work is or how hard I have to work or whatever, because I think not having that for 4 years has made me feel a great sense of privilege whenever I have work that is could be tough, and most work is, especially being an entrepreneur, is very tough, but is meaningful. I have never ever been disrespectful of the work I have, because I value it so much. And I think that was again sort of this major shift. So that was the one big challenge from the take the leap. And I never knew that this is how things would turn out. You feel like you've been out of the 4 years. It's not always that everybody is able to integrate back and maybe even do more than before, as it happened with me, right? Maybe my effort, how universe threw me chances, who knows. But I think it is important to not give in. And then secondly, same thing, fast forward to 2017, when it wasn't about coming back to work, which was the big challenge, which it was after those 4 years. It was about starting a whole business. I think, this thing that people think passionate. You can't suddenly be passionate about something. You suddenly can't sit and like, and I, an apple will drop on your head and you're like, whatever. I think you become more passionate about something that you choose to become more passionate about. You start to go down a rabbit hole, right? Like my passion for this business, what I'm building at Harappa, continues to grow. It wasn't there. So I think the biggest challenge is first finding a problem and then being able to construct some theory of solution around it that you feel is meaningful enough for you to do your best work and your hardest work. I think that is actually a pretty big challenge, right?
Hmm.
Like, what kind of work feels meaningful enough that I will work at this pace, I will take these knocks, right? And I think for me, for the personal vision statement could have also gone to a healthcare company because it said was recognition, scale, and impact. It didn't say I want to build the world's coolest learning company, right? Your personal vision doesn't have to be that specific. It could be anything. But from that to say, okay, actually online learning or ed tech as you call it, online learning is a better classification of the business that we're in, has, of course, by building it to a certain size and quality, I'll get the recognition as I'm getting with people like you are inviting me to speak. And the fact that it is led by technology and we're ambitious about it means that it will have scale. And once it has scale and this curriculum is fresh and a product works, it will have impact, right? So I think then the business that one chose, I think I really went back to my personal vision statement many times to say, okay, does an online learning business give me the opportunity to have recognition, scale, and impact? And I think once that was solidified, was when one of the two, three big challenges to get started is to find something you feel that driven about, right? The second challenge is find people who you can do this with, and in that case, my ex boss and who's now my co-founder became that person, right? Uh, for say, hey, it's even if you fail, doing it with this person, you'll learn and you'll have fun and it will feel meaningful. Even if this idea fails, it's a worthwhile idea. I think you have to focus on the what if it went right. Is that worth it? Rather than what if we could go wrong.
I mean, you are in so many words, Tracy, explaining what the growth mindset is, right? I think that is what you have beautifully narrated. That identifying really, I don't know something, but that the more important thing is I don't know something yet, right? I am passionate about it. I will find out about it. But I think what really matters in having a growth mindset, and I think it has become so critical in today's world because everything is changing around us, right? Just because you're successful today, just because things are working for you today, does not mean that they will work for you tomorrow. You're never like sort of set up for the rest of your life. And I mean, if you look at your business, and I don't know how it is getting impacted by artificial intelligence and chat gpt, and how are you going to bring all of that to really make Harappa maybe work with generative AI rather than compete with generative AI, right? As a learning platform. Because I mean, I know so many people who are using generative AI as the best way in which they are learning today. So it's quite fascinating, right? And I think what you're saying there is very, very important to underline that the definition of what you do might keep changing. But once you know where you are going, those are just channels. And the
Yes.
more important thing in that, I think what you said was you knew that this might work or you will learn. So the whole idea that failure is an opportunity to learn, it looks very good, but to really understand it in your bones, I think you really need to go on that journey. And I think you are a living example of doing that, right? Keeping this at the back of your mind always. What I want to explore a little bit with you, and you mentioned about this whole idea of self-esteem and work. I mean, as you know, at Thrive, we work with a lot of women globally, and one of the key mentoring topics, across multiple women that are there, is this whole idea of when is the best time to become a mother, and if I become a mother, do I need to give up on work? And you're right. I mean, the context 15 years back was completely different than the context today, where remote work I mean, that's the biggest gift of COVID, that remote work is sort of accepted. As a reporter, I think if you were that, and in today's world, it could be so possible. I mean, I was in fact trying to meet reporters, and apparently they don't meet anymore. They only do Zoom calls. So I think that the world has really, really changed, right? But I really want you to speak to those women, who are at this moment, because whatever life choices they made, feeling, and maybe they are facing a lot of rejection, because it is true. And I think maybe some societies and some cultures and maybe some industries are more open to that. But this whole women back to work is a very important theme. And at least where I live in Switzerland, that seems to be very difficult, very difficult. And especially for women who have an immigrant background. That is something that is, I mean, that speaks close to my heart, of course, is close to my heart, because I find that such an, I mean, as immigrants, and especially as women immigrants, we bring all those skills. We are highly skilled, highly educated, and then for whatever reason, it might be childcare, it might be elder care, it doesn't matter. There are many different, there are some family, circumstances that make you step back, and then you want to reintegrate, and becomes damn difficult. It becomes very difficult, even if you have had a stellar resume. I mean, a lot of the people, unlike finding something and becoming an entrepreneur, really try to go back to a job, really like to get some structure and get some work going, and feel very defeated, with these rejections that they get. So I just wanted, from your point of view, Shreyasi, what you would say to these people. And I'm sure that some of them are listening to us right now, when we speak about this, and when you have spoken about your story of, yes, self-esteem becomes an issue. Work is so fused with our identity. I mean, we are, as moms of young children, we are working. It's just a different kind of work, right?
Yes, of course.
Not the sort of work that gets recognized either monetarily or status wise, or showing the clear career growth, etc., right? But that's the reality. And today, as I said, it's not just childcare, it's elder care. I'm actually seeing a
Yes.
lot in my generation taking a step back, even maybe moving countries to be with their parents, because they know that the parents are in the sunset years, and they really want to be there for them, right? But everybody knows, I think, in their mind, when they're taking that step back, that this is transitory and I'm going to come back. Unfortunately, a lot of women are struggling to come back. So, and I guess there are logistical reasons, but from a mindset point of view, Shreyasi, what would you say, having gone on that journey?
So, a couple of things that I'd love to say here. Over the last 10, 12 years, I've done a bunch of things, right? Being the editor of a magazine, written a book, written a column, then moved to Harappa, you moved to Entrepreneurship. Like I said, like it's kind of confusing. I do think I could say courage, curiosity and courage to me are two very important attributes as one is trying to, reintegrate or reset one's career, given what the context is. I think we all have to understand. And I think it's a reality. There's some things in your life are fixed. You can of course be upset with them, and one does get upset sometimes, and then therefore you have your girl gang or whoever to talk about it. But let's for a moment imagine that the workplace is a constant commodity. It's not going to change. Your parents, spouses, children are not going to change, right? The society is not going to change. They're fixed commodities. What would you do then, right? And I think that needs a little bit of courage and curiosity. The first, I think for me, what was very liberating 5 or 6 years back is when I realized that actually not that many people care about how you're like not that people are much more self-absorbed, and care much more about themselves, and are actually not watching each other as much as we had thought. So I do feel like sometimes the stigma of society is a little overplayed in our minds. I actually wish we would all care about each other that much. I think we don't. In a way, that's great. That liberates you from, especially when you start something. People don't even know. The first couple of years of a company is starting, people don't even know what you're doing. It's very difficult to explain. I think that anonymity and that actually lack of scrutiny is actually a really great liberating moment, right? So I think I'd start second thing in research, and at Harappa we do a lot of research to understand working women. I've actually found when there's a personal cost and a lot of personal responsibilities in a certain period of your life about whether it's elder care, child care, I think our immediate assumption is that you should do work which is less intellectually stimulating or less difficult or less whatever, so that you can balance. I think I would try and kind of spin that around to say that in those situations, sometimes paid or professional work or work outside the house, however you want to call it, sometimes is worth the personal cost you bear to do it, only when it's actually very stimulating and when you know, or it's very meaningful. I actually feel like, when you go slow, like to go and do some like low stimulus job which is not going to go anywhere at a time when your personal life also needs so much of you, I feel kind of makes less sense. I to keep at it makes more sense when the role itself is teaching you a lot, growing you a lot in the future, and has future potential. So I'm always very careful when I'm speaking to friends or whoever about to say that, listen, maybe flip this around to say don't go easy, but actually find something that's as tough and meaningful as going to have future rewards rather than going slow, right? And the third thing I say that at different points, and I think we all know the biological rhythms of the world, that there will be periods. How is civilization going to go ahead? It is that one gender is the one which needs to have I think we all know that, and it's going to be a break, 2 month break, but we all live till 80, 85, 90. Some of us will have to, some of us will choose to be in employed positions till we are 75, 80. In that period, when you start to think of your career as a 50-year, 60-year canvas, then a 1 or 2 year break doesn't seem like a big thing. But I think we imagine it to be so big and so limiting and so complete and final, while we're in the middle of it, not going, wow, I have 40 more years of canvas to build it, and I'm just really getting started. So I think elongate, sort of, extending our aperture to think of a career as a 40-year career in which extreme caregiving, where, we're sort of tied to the home in some ways, if we've chosen to, for whichever, whatever reason that you've chosen to, could be 5 years, 7 years, 8 years, but really you have a 40-year career. So for me, extending that aperture, really saying, hey, what does going slow mean? Does that mean compromising on the quality, nature, and future potential of the job? And third, a little bit feeling you're free because nobody is watching you as much as you think they are. They're too busy watching themselves. I think those are the three kind of in ways in which I think about.
I, I,
I think.
tot- I totally love that. I mean, especially this whole idea, and you're so right. The whole idea that people are watching you and what will people say. I mean, that is such a limiting and in many ways not a useful idea. And actually, it's not even true. But it's just us, right? We feel as if the world is watching us.
We
We
are watching
the
us too.
world is too busy watching their own thing. That is
Yeah,
so true. But you've said
yeah,
something very counterintuitive, and that is very interesting. And I must say, also new for me, where you say that even if you have something very challenging, thanks to your family or other personal pursuits. I mean, I think a lot of us today have creative and physical pursuits that we might want to combine, right? I mean, I can actually say that happens with a very good friend of mine. And for him, it's extremely important to keep running marathons and to keep overachieving in that. And that is equally important as career growth and, getting that next big promotion and bonus. So whatever it might be, I think that it's irrespective of that. What you've said is that other thing that you are doing, do not let that then reduce the intellectual stimulation of your job, because then it starts feeling a bit more redundant. But
yeah.
if it's keeping you equal, it's like almost complementing whatever else you decide to pursue in your life. Then they balance each other out and both will sort of feed off each other. I think that is something really important to realize, because you are very right. I know plenty and plenty of women who made actually the opposite decision, right? To take it slow, to either come out completely or do these tick in the box kind of, work. And then at a particular point felt very demotivated with the whole thing, and then stepped out completely, and then struggling. It's like a vicious cycle. So what would you then do, what is much better to do is to identify, I will still do very intellectually stimulating and meaningful work for me, which is different for different people, different for different women, and keep that in mind to be able to then again, it's like various radio channels, isn't it? I mean, we'll just have to like reduce the volume on one channel and increase it on another channel, because you're very right, it is quite challenging to be, for example, if you are in multiple creative pursuits, then you'll realize that there is only so much energy you have, right? You will notice, I mean, as I told you, I'm writing a book and I'm really finding it quite challenging to do other creative, completely new pursuits, which would come quite easily to me, usually because I could do many different things at the same time. But now I'm so consumed by the book, and there's so much just energy and mind space going into that, that I really want to do the other things to the extent that they will not completely overload me. And because then that's the other challenge
Yeah.
of your site, right? That then everything becomes sort of good enough, and you don't want to pursue good enough. Thank you so much, Shreyasi. One
No,
last thing that you,
yeah,
yes.
I, it's like creating your own menu every 3 years, right? Because all our rhythms change, right? So then you're like, hey, do I right now have a garnish of personal time off to do exploratory passions? Or right now my life is about, like for me right now, it's all about getting my son, supporting my son to get to his dream college and, enjoying high school and doing well and building Harappa, right? You know, those are my, meat and potatoes part of my life, and the rest is, and something's gotta give. But I feel like every 2 or 3 years to say, hey, what are the two spikes that I'll focus on, and the rest that I'll maintain, right? Because obviously, so I'm spending less time with extended family. I'll spend time with core family, but I don't have the luxury of time to spend. But that's not going to be forever,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it will let up and things. I feel like just kind of like, I think we do have more agency. Sometimes I think it just needs us to really go deep into ourselves to say, what do I really want now? And what do I really want at a 2 year period? I think thinking in 2 year periods and building this menu for yourself, I find useful, because then you're leaving enough space to anticipate that life and situations will change, right? And then you do that again.
No, that is very useful. And this idea that you gave about really look at the broader canvas, right? I mean, some of the most powerful women in the world today are in their 60s. So I think that is just a mindset again, because it is true that the peak careers for men and for women come at different stages, and that is biological in nature, right? We are actually focusing a little bit more on nurturing, in whichever way, for those of us who choose to do that. But really, this whole idea that yes, you can, have it all, just not at the same time. I think I think
Not
that
always,
not
not
all
always.
at the same time.
But it's okay. We have the lady. I've actually seen in the US, like I met this academic. She's a PhD in robotics at Berkeley, and she was 84, and I met her at her lab, and she still comes to her lab. I think Madeleine Albright, for example, was in her 80s. When so we've got a lot of time. If you were, there's a lot of time. There's more than enough time.
Thank you so much, Tracy. This has been an invigorating conversation, as I expected it to be. And yeah, we will be in touch. We will be in touch. Thank you, everybody. Have a very nice morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Bye for now.
Thank you. Thank you, Shri. Bye.